problem with the land use plan for me, it's got all this contradictory kind of language.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's this, we want to do this, but we want to do that. So then it becomes just a balancing act.
So you can,
You know, it's not,
Ready?
2 commissioners can speak.
Okay, we'll call the planning commission meeting to order. And the first thing, we'll approve the agenda. Tim has added a B under number 2, training. And so, and the minutes, you've all had a chance to read the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
And the agenda is approved, amended.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Okay. And we'll move on to the Jeff and Dana Bartheld request for a conditional use permit.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if we could do the number 2 ongoing business first,
sure.
then Meva can go ahead and take care of item A, and I'll take care of item B.
Okay, let's do that. The
So, yeah, so for item A, the Matt Regan on the agenda, that's going to be tabled to the May meeting.
Okay. And Tim, on the training?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to announce that we are looking to set up another training session for the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment members on procedures and stuff like that. Would be set for May the 2nd at 1 p.m., no, 2 p.m., starting at 2 p.m. right here in this room again, much like the last one. It's going to be.
What was that date again?
I'm sorry?
Date?
May 2nd. Yeah,
What day of the week?
that is a Monday. And it's going to be at 2 and right here in this room. And the county attorney is going to be the one presenting it. And there's no business that's going to be conducted. It's
Training.
just training.
Okay. Okay, and we'll move on to item A, under new business. Neva?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This request is for a private use camping area to allow 3 RVs, camper sites, and 2 tent sites in the R1 zone district at 3911 East Highway 61. The Barthelds had purchased the property in November 2018. The property is entirely within the R1 zoning district. The proposed use does meet the definition of a campground, and the proposed use also meets the Minnesota Department of Health criteria for requiring state licensing. The request is to allow 3 RV camper sites with 2 tent sites. The applicant is willing to accept an interim use approval in lieu of a conditional use. Background and project details. The applicants are requesting to allow 3 RV camper sites and 2 tent sites on their property. They propose to have guests from their church community located in Princeton to come to visit, as well as function as a retreat for alcohol recovery. In conversations with staff, the applicants have stated that they do not plan to have full capacity on a regular basis. The application suggests quiet hours at 10 p.m., but doesn't list morning quiet hours. In addition to campground activities, the application also includes an annual event referred to as a fellowship trip. The application does not explain what activities will occur at the property during this event, but it does state 2 campers will be staying at the property. The 3 RV camper pads are already installed with electric hookups and are very close to the east property line. Between the camper spots on the sketch isn't quite accurate. The camper pads are located quite close to, together between the camper number 2 and 3 on their site sketch. The applicants had guests stay over in 2021 until this use came to the attention of Land Services. The previous zoning administrator, Bill Lane, notified the applicants that a conditional use permit would be required after observing the RV pads. Mr. Lane retired shortly after that communication. In January 2022, the new zoning administrator was notified of this use and reached out to the Barthelds to begin the CUP process. The applicants responded and have brought forth this application to the Planning Commission and County Board's consideration. The after-the-fact fee was not applied in this case because Mr. Lane's letter to the applicants did not require the after-the-fact fee, and current staff chose to remain consistent with that determination. The regular conditional use permit fee was paid. The applicants proposed to bring 1 or 2 portable outhouses onto the property to provide sanitary facilities to guests. The site sketch does not show the septic mound, but it is located between the dog kennel and the power line easement. The RV pads are located very close to the east property line, less than 10 feet, and are placed closer together than shown on the site sketch. Vegetation between these pads and the neighboring property does not provide visual screening, which is augmented by the lack of the setback between the property line and the camper pads. Zoning considerations. The applicants have stated that they do not want to run a campground in the traditional sense. However, after further review of their proposal and ordinance language. By definition, their proposed activity does meet the definition of a campground per Cook County zoning ordinance section 2.24, which goes, campground is an open-air recreation area where temporary shelters such as tents and travel trailers are intended to provide short-term occupancy. Additionally, the campground definition cited in a reference book, our ordinance references, goes as a plot of ground on which 2 or more campsites are located, established, or maintained for occupancy by camping units as temporary living quarters for recreation, education, or vacation purposes. This property is within the R1 single-family residential zone district. Campgrounds are not listed as a conditional use in this district. If a use is not listed as a conditional use, it's generally not allowed. This conditional use application is eligible for consideration based on the criteria listed in the zoning ordinance, section 10.03D, which states, conditional use is enumerated. Any use not expressly identified as permitted, conditional, or prohibited use within this ordinance may, at the discretion of the county, be processed as a conditional or interim use. Minnesota state rules define a recreational camping area, which is basically the state term for a campground, as follows. Recreational camping area means any area, whether privately or publicly owned, used on a daily, nightly, or weekly, or longer basis for the accommodation of 5 or more tents or recreational camping vehicles free of charge for compensation. This application, as proposed, does require a Minnesota health license and would be required to meet their guidelines. One issue with that is that the RV camper pads don't meet the required 10-foot setback from the property boundary lines. The applicants would either need to lower the number of accommodations, less than 5, or relocate the RV pads to meet the state requirements. The zoning ordinance allows for conditional use permits to be processed and allowed as interim use permits. In reviewing the feedback from the public comments received, this application may be considered for an interim use permit. Staff have discussed this with the applicant and they have agreed to this change. If this application is denied, the applicants would be allowed 1 permitted recreational vehicle under provisions of 5.17 of the zoning ordinance. Staff recommendations. This application has been processed and noticed for use of 3 RV camper pads and 2 tent sites intended for private use with friends and family. This defined use was discussed and agreed to with applicants in conversations with staff and meets the definition of a campground. If during the hearing it appears that the use is anything more than that, such as a church open to the public or a drug and alcohol recovery center, a different conditional use permit should be applied for. As a side note, churches are listed as a conditional use in the R1 zone district. Included with this packet is a memo from Mitch Travis with a review of the property's compliance with general zoning regulations, as well as a memo from Mitchell Everson requiring sanitary facilities. Many issues have been raised by the public during the public comment period. If the Planning Commission determines additional detail is needed from the applicant, they can request that information before making a recommendation to the county board. From a technical review of the property, the most significant issues are as follows. Campgrounds are specifically not listed as a conditional use permit in the R1 zone district. Is this use compatible with the criteria listed in 10.05B? The close proximity of the existing RV camper pads to the property line. Lack of vegetative buffer between the 10 sites and RV camper pads to the property. Parking availability. And is this 2-acre lot adequately sized for the proposed use? The Planning Commission and County Board should review the criteria listed under section 10.05, which is included with your packets, to determine whether this proposed use is appropriate in this location. I have listed 6 items to be specifically evaluated. In the public noticing, there was 13 letters of notification sent to adjoining property owners. Land Services has received 17 comments. Significant opposition feedback from the neighborhood has been received during the public comment period. Opposition to the request is due to several factors, including incompatibility with the zone district and neighborhood. The property is too small for a campground, visual impacts, after-the-fact campsites and likelihood of compliance with rules, decreased property values, increased nuisances, lack of detail in the application, and the close proximity to the eastern neighbor. We did receive 59 pages of public comments in response to our public comments, which is included as a second packet with the staff reports. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Okay, and I will request input from the applicant to present your proposal. I assume you're the Barthelds?
Yes, we are. I'm Jeff Bartheld. This is my wife, Dana.
Thank
And
you.
we appreciate you hearing this, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
I'll start, and then Jeff will put his 2 cents in too. I'm listening to Neva read that off, and I don't even recognize that at all of what we're what we wanted to do. We have friends of ours that come up and want to visit. They stay overnight or a weekend. Sometimes they have a camper, sometimes they stay in our camper. We weren't aware that we needed to have a conditional use permit to be able to have them do that. So we were going to apply so that we were in compliance. We weren't aware that we needed to do that, to have somebody stay with a camper. And so that's how this whole thing got started. We just want to have our friends come up and visit. Some stay a weekend, nobody stayed longer than a weekend. We've never had anybody stay in a tent, although we're going to have a retreat, a church retreat for a long weekend in June. And we just wanted to have the availability to have people bring campers or tents and stay during that little period of time.
The vast majority of them are going to be staying in the hotels and cabins around the area here.
Yeah, we absolutely positively do not have any interest in running or starting a campground. Absolutely positively do not want to do, I don't want to do that. I don't. We don't expect to have 3 people or 3 campers and or 2 people in tents at any other time other than the retreat, and we may not have them then either. We were just trying to guess a maximum that we thought we might have during that time for the application.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
And if it was a issue, we just have these folks get a cabin or a resort room or stay at the campground in town. We don't want to start a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
There are friends coming up to visit. That's it.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. Now, we're not starting a church, we're not running a church. We don't want that. If a church gets started, it'll be in town and the church will do it, not us.
No, you know,
And-
we came up here to help with the bishop to get a church started, but we have no intention on putting it on our property.
No, we would never do that. No, we're not ever doing that. And as far as a recovery center, I don't know where in the world that ever started. I'm a licensed, stop it, no, just wait. I'm the one right now. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, okay? If I wanted to work in the field, I'd get a job as that. But the whole county doesn't even have the capacity to hire somebody with that. They have the one guy here that runs his little program here, and that's it for the whole county. And at my age, I'm not going to start a recovery center. I'm too damn old.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And one of the things that happens with a conditional use permit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim and Neva, once the conditional use is granted for this campground, it goes with the property. And that's
Well,
But
we
Well, this is
agreed
interim
that it
use.
would be an interim thing.
this is a conditional use permit request for long-term.
No,
Tim.
Neva
Okay,
changed that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It had originally been presented as such. Over the course of time, that was modified.
Right.
As it states, and as Neva had stated in the narrative and subsequent to that, that this particular use that's identified here is not one that is identified as within the list of the permitted or conditional uses.
Correct.
And so it can, at the county's discretion, being at staff or planning commission, board of commissioners' discretion as to whether it would be approved or not, but it can be processed as an interim or conditional use.
Correct.
It had initiated as a conditional use. However, due to the obvious concerns that have been brought about,
Right.
that it was converted or modified to be an interim use, which means it would have to have a termination period to it.
And we would be very much happy to be under
Right.
discretion to come back once a year. That's not a big
Just for a
deal.
review to see if it's working for everybody.
Right. And that's the start of the concern and the start of what this really is. Because we started working with a long-term permanent situation.
No,
But now
no,
we've got a
no.
different situation.
I am, quite
Okay.
frankly, I'm too damn old to start
Okay,
that. I have no
Right.
interest in doing that.
And
We
if-
only want to accommodate the county with their permit so that we can have
Now
our
we
friends come
understand
and
that.
stay. That's it.
When we
And-
were down in Mille Lacs County, I had a conditional use permit for an in-home business at our house. And that one there, they were able to put right in the conditional use permit. When the property got sold, the permit
Right.
ended. So,
Right.
you know, that would be at your discretion too.
okay.
And I let Neva know.
So
but
you,
as far as the recovery part of it, we support people in recovery.
right,
But they have to be in recovery, long-term recovery, and we have to know them. Never, 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 never are we going to have people pop in and feel like they can just stay. And people that are addicts
They don't
think
get
that
to
they can
come.
just drop in? No, absolutely not. If they're
okay.
not in
We're-
long-term
We're getting
recovery.
beyond the
No,
permit
but
here.
it was brought up.
Yeah,
And if they're not in long-term recovery, and we know them, they aren't welcome.
right. And, sir, you had comments you wish to make?
You.
Oh, no, she's pretty well talked for me.
Okay, great. And we may get back to clarifying things, but thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, I'm going to open it for, if there's, I'm going to open it to the general public, and I'm going to ask you to find a seat, and anyone else who wishes to make public comment
We gotta
at
move.
this hearing, will change seats and listen to someone from the public.
Madam Chair, is
Yes,
there any interest to set time limits with the number of people in the room and
Right.
the amount of business to cover?
right. And I would request that we not just repeat the same. I think I've read all the letters in the packets, and we can make points, but don't go over everything for every single person here. I think if we cover it as a group, that would be wonderful, and if it's been covered, you know, you can say, I agree with that, or don't agree, so.
How about a 2-minute time limit?
Sure,
Does that seem fair?
okay, we've got one brave soul.
Ivy Hawking, just kind of have a question and a clarification. I'm kind of confused about this interim thing, because my response, my comments were based on the CUP, so I don't get this interim thing. If somebody can explain that?
Okay, Tim will.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and that is a good and interesting question. A CUP, conditional use permit, is a permit that when it is granted, it becomes as a property, right? It runs with the property. Property transfers over from that property owner to the next property owner. The next property owner, that conditional use permit continues on. Interim use permit is a similar nature in where it's a use that's not one that's really generally consistent with the property, but it's something that can be done if it's done with conditions, but an interim use permit has to have some type of termination to it. So it has to have either a termination with the transfer of property or with a timeline. So it could be for a 1-year period of time. If anybody had been around during the time where we ran the interim use permits for the Pleiadian Retreat Center that was on the east side of town, that was done for a year's worth of time to give kind of a trial period to see how that was going to work or not. Then it terminated, and then in order for that to continue on, they would have had to have come back and be re-evaluated, and then we take into considerations all of the impacts that have been felt by the community at that point. So that's why we had switched it to an interim use permit, so that there would be a definitive end time to it as defined or recommended by the Planning Commission and adopted by the Board of Commissioners. So the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the full Board of Commissioners, and they could either recommend that it be out and out denied, or they can recommend that it would be approved for a certain specific time period and then adjust whatever that time period would be in the trial period.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question about the process? Anyone wish to speak at the public hearing? We'll try a couple minutes and see how it goes.
My name is Tim Pratt. I live 3919, right next door. I'm the east neighbor. I should have wrote something down. I apologize if I go over 2 minutes. We all have friends come and stay. All of us, friends and family, come and stay with us. None of us need 3 camper pads. None of us need 2 tent sites and 2 porta-johns. To change it now to interim, why? We've seen what's happened over 2 years. Are we going to do interim to see how it goes? To see how things develop over 2 years? We've seen what he's done with 2 years, both of them. Go across the property. If you've read my letter, you know. Go across onto the highway and cut down land so they have, or cut down trees. I don't have a view of the lake. I follow the rules. They clear cut their property. And deal with it afterwards. They were told not to put in these camper pads, and they did. They did all of this without a permit. They were told not to have people come in. After they were caught, I guess, Bill Lane caught them. They said, don't do this anymore. They were caught on Facebook saying, hey, come and register to stay here during the retreat. That's why we're here. The camper pads are already there. They just got caught, and that's why we're here. And it's frustrating for me. This isn't going to be next door to me. This is going to be on my property line. Please deny this. It doesn't fit the neighborhood. We've seen what he's done in 2 years, what they've done in 2 years. There's no need for an interim permit to see what he's going to do.
Thank you.
Please deny this. Thank you.
Someone else wish to speak? Can you step to the microphone, please?
Kind of wish I was an auctioneer, because I don't know if I can get 1 page done in 2 minutes, but Ivy said I could take part of her time, being she was extra. A friend of mine told me to go a different direction. I mean, you can shout and scream and holler and this and that, but I went on to science. And the greatest fear I have with the approval of the permit application is the fact that their actions may cause a nightmare when it comes to the vehicles on Highway 61.
And your name, please.
Oh, James Vanette. I live a third of a mile from the property.
Okay,
right
thank
across
you.
from Paradise Beach.
Okay.
The new Bloomington or someplace. We had more Twin Cities people on there, Paradise, than anywhere.
Okay.
Anyway, they're planning the service, in late June during the height of the tourist season. They are planning a service on the shores of Lake Superior with an out-of-town pastor and praise band. The key point is that they're planning to have this event across Highway 61 on the shore. This means that they will have to travel across the highway numerous times from their property to the service on the shore. The following facts should show this is a disastrous idea. The property line is approximately 200 yards from Paradise Beach pull-off. The past 2 summers have shown vehicles on the beach area, and both sides of the road are covered with cars. There are times we can have counted over 24 vehicles and even a semi once in a while. We noticed the travel use had to use their Jake brakes to slow the trucks down at the beach site to avoid hitting pedestrians on crossing the road. The same thing could happen when you are crossing at random from that property to the shore. The property line is 110 yards approximately west of the Manitou Trail intersection. Traffic coming from the east must go up an incline from Judge Magny Park down the other side of the hill near the intersection where the road begins to curve towards the south. Any traffic from the east will be unable to see activity until they are on top of them. This means the pastor, band, and the congregation will have to cross busy major highway during the tourist season. Just last week, 2 deer were hit near the property line trying to cross the highway. This is extremely hazardous for any motorists from the east if people are crossing the road to go to the shore. If they are planning 1 or more large gatherings, where are all the vehicles going to park? This is the same problem that the county had a few years ago when they had to control the vehicle parking on the Gunflint Trail during the dog sled races. The property owners only have 2 acres, and the bulk of this land is covered with ornaments, tent sites, and trailer pads. Where are all the vehicles going to park? The only alternative is the shoulders. We already have witnessed problems with parking on shoulders at Paradise Beach. It's plain to see that causing any disruption to the normal flow of traffic on a major highway like Highway 61 during tourist season or any other time will result in accidents. To make it worse, the hill, the curve, and hinders the westbound driver's field of view. There may be a lot of reasons to deny this permit application, but safety must be the first concern of everybody. The injury or loss of one life, knowing the circumstances could have been prevented, would be a grievous error. Thank you.
Thank you. Does someone else wish to speak?
Hi, I took notes on my phone, so I apologize if this is a little disjointed.
Can you state your name and kind of where you're located?
Gwen Carver, 3830 Manitou.
Okay.
And the reason I came up here was because I had initially sent a letter saying that I think that an interim use permit should be considered. That was before I read the 58 pages of people's comments, and what Tim said was actually what I was going to start with is after reading the Pratt's account of how this has impacted their retirement home, it just tore my heart out. Like, to move up here and think that you're moving to the, North Shore, which has been green for miles past Grand Marais, except for that one house, and all of a sudden have like lights shining in your kitchen. It was really upsetting to me. So I wanted to come up and say I actually don't think an interim use permit should be considered. And here's my reasons in no particular order. I don't think ignorance of the law is an excuse to say after the fact, oh, we didn't know. They've put all this stuff in, no permitting, no checking whether the electricity is correct, none of that. And Dana just said that it's worked out for everyone. It hasn't worked out for everyone. It hasn't worked out for all the neighbors that wrote that stuff. It clearly hasn't worked out for the Pratts. And that makes me think that comment, not taking the community and the neighbors into account, concerns me, because what this last person said, I missed your name, but they've had 2 years and this is what happened. I haven't heard like any sort of, I don't know, not apology, but like no sign of being contrite for the fact that, they put all this stuff in without even asking. And if you can do that, I'd love to put another building on our lot, but I won't because I know I can't. And if I was planning to, the first thing I would do would be to call the city. And I follow, like someone else said, I follow the rules. And the thought of not checking with the DNR about how the wetland would be impacted and cutting down all those trees, drainage, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an environmental engineer, but it strikes me as something you need to check out before you start doing, and it shows, I think, a lack of respect for the environment and for the surrounding community. I do not think that this, I mean, if they're gonna have a few people over here and there, whatever, that's fine. I'm in recovery. I appreciate the wanting to help people in recovery. But what I think, I can't remember, someone said, we all have people come visit. I don't have tent pads. I don't have camper pads. Our neighbors, the Luce, who no longer live here, they had 50, 60 people come up every 4th of July. Those people figured out a way to do it. They didn't build stuff that they weren't supposed to without asking. And then Dana said this was people for long-term recovery, but Jeff's letter said it was people early in recovery that needed a place to go to find out that there's places you can be not around alcohol and drugs. If you're in early recovery, you might need that, but if you're in long-term recovery, you figured that out. So that I don't get the disconnect between those two things. And I also am concerned that an interim use permit will be kind of used as a stepping stone to a CUP, and that concerns me. And there's only 2 acres and there's already all this stuff on it. So again, it doesn't feel like it works for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
So thanks, and thanks, Madam Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to speak on other issues?
I'm Beverly Pratt. I'm the next door neighbor that you hear about. This property is all shoreland, in shoreland, in the coastal management zone plan. What I've investigated into that, there doesn't seem to be any way this type of thing would fit in that plan. He's zoned R1, well, okay, you know all of this. I would also be against an interim because, like Dana said, we could come back every year and do a new one. What would be the point of doing an interim if that would be their plan? I hope you deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have something to add?
Maybe ask him to use the mic. Should he? I'm not picking up too.
I'm Jerry Jensen, and I live on the other side of the Pratts.
Can you pull the mic closer? Because we're not hearing you really well.
Can you hear me now?
Very good. Better.
I'm Jerry Jensen. I live on the other side of Pratts, so I'm very nearby. And I have not much to add to, but I want to confirm all of what has been said so far. I also have lots of company that comes and visit without need of a campground and a row of porta potties that I wonder how would they ever get emptied from the way they have placed them on the map. There's no road to them. How often is that going to happen? I mean, there's a lot of questions that come up regarding having the Pratts have to look at a row of porta potties. I also think maybe sometimes we're giving them enough. There was some sentence in one of the statements that I read. It said compliments to them for seeking permits for their septic tank and for their road that they had put in. And I thought, well, I don't know who should get credit for that, because I think that any reputable contractor in this county is going to make sure they have a permit before they put in a septic tank. They will make sure they have a permit before they put in a driveway. I don't know if the credit should go to the Barthelds for that, because so far, another other issue, they have just gone ahead and did what they felt like it, but I don't think they could have put in their own septic tank, dig in the hole, put in their own driveway. So, I don't know, I get real concerned too for the future with what else might happen there in addition to what the disaster that's already happened, and it's sad to see and sad to go by. I also did not appreciate a Paradise Beach version of Bentleyville this Christmas as I drove home. We don't need that. It's not, it doesn't fit with the natural environment that all the other neighbors seem to appreciate and have respected in the structures that they have built and so forth. Anyway, that's enough.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? Step forward.
Hello, I'm Deb Vinette, and I live a few doors down from the Barthelds. And I want to say, as someone who takes care of Bev and Tim's place when they're gone, that the Barthelds made a comment in their letter to introduce themselves, that the pads are set up so that there's no lights glaring in the neighbors' houses. And the thick woods between the two properties make sure of that too. First of all, there's no thick woods because they took down all the trees all the way to the property line. So there's maybe 15 feet of trees on Bev and Tim's side, but it's not, in the wintertime, it's not enough, because the lights from their yard lights shine in Bev's kitchen, and when I was taking care of her dog and going over there late at night to feed him, I didn't have to turn the lights on in the kitchen to feed him. It was illuminated by the neighbors. And if they get campers in there and have this summer retreat, the lights will be so bright and irritating to the neighbors that it's unconscionable. And I hope you turn this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Okay, we'll close it to the public, and the Bartholomews will have one opportunity to address any comments that have been made and clarify any statements or questions quickly.
Madam Chairman, this is some of the most foolishness that I have ever heard yet. First of all, we don't want a campground. You know, the campsites that Mr. Pratt says went in after Bill Lane contacted us, we'd never heard from Bill Lane, and we never heard anything until we'd heard from Ms. Maxwell.
Okay, let me just stop you there. It's not ridiculous. This is part of the process.
I know it's part of the process, but...
And you have gone ahead without engaging the process, and now we're correcting and dealing with what is there.
Pretty much what's there is 2 flat spots with the boxes not hooked in yet. If you don't like, you know, it, and we will work with the commission any way we can, you know, if we could just say, we're gonna have company, that's all we want to do, is we want to be able to have somebody pull in with a camper and have
Okay,
company.
but you've got a campground going
That's
right
not
now.
a campground.
So,
That's
yeah,
not
by
a
the definition,
campground.
it is. So we're not gonna argue, we're
We
gonna
we
solve
won't
this.
argue the point, but anyway, you know,
Are there statements that you feel are inaccurate?
I have a number of statements. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is Mrs. Pratt didn't like the idea that we cleared the area there. And, you know, I feel that, I'm sorry, but we're paying the taxes on the land. We decided we wanted to have an open area. Mr. Pratt come up with a bunch of stories. What he doesn't realize is we do own the land across the road from there. We can, yes, we do. The state.
Okay, we're not
the
gonna
st-
we're not gonna
I
talk to
will-
each other.
I will show you that because we just got a letter from the state
We're not even going to
DOT.
discuss this property
And
across the road.
we don't
That's
care about that.
between
We're
you
not-
and the state.
Yeah, that's,
So let's
we've
stick to
been
the
through with
conditional use
that.
permit here.
But I'm just trying to say there's a bunch of inaccuracies that are being told here. You know, people are trying to make this out to be a big deal. You know, the lights, Bev asked me to move the 1 yard light we had, and I did. I moved it. It was shining in there. I didn't realize it was. You know, there's more trees in there than 15 feet on the Pratt side. We do have trees on our side. And it's just, this
I
is
don't think
amazing.
that's, we're not gonna worry about that. What we're worrying about is what is going to be built there and what is there and
What is
whether
gonna
it
be-
requires a permit or
What
if
What
it's
is going to be built
permitted.
there, it is just a place for some,
I'd like to make a motion that we close the public comment period, reserving your ability to answer questions.
yes, sir.
At this time.
Okay, so the motion's been made. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. So we're going to base it on the information we've received so far, and we leave it open to questions if we have some. Okay, we're going to close it to the public, and we're going to go to the commissioners here. Anyone wish to comment?
I will. I'll start. I've driven that stretch of highway for almost 40 years, and a lot, because I've done a lot of work on Tom Lake and in Hovland, and so I'm very familiar with it. I spent a lot of time on Paradise Beach, that whole area in there. And I was pretty amazed when I drove by, because I haven't been up there because of COVID and other things, while you've been developing this piece of property. I did not drive into your property, but I did a slow drive-by, parked, looked, but I did drive in Pratt's driveway to get a visual impression of from where their house is and looking into your property. And I have to say, I have a bunch of things. I think the lot is too small. Every residence in Cook County is permitted a guest house, a bunkhouse, one, for their guests in the R1 districts. So, I mean, I could see you setting aside a pad or a tent space or building a little cabin for your guests. That would be perfectly permitted. But I cannot see granting any kind of conditional, whether it's interim or permanent, for this property for the reasons spelled out over and over again in the responses we got to your request. The property is too small. It doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. As somebody has remarked, one of the people have remarked, that whole drive along there has been a beautiful scenic drive for years because there's been a lot of screening between the highway and the properties that have been developed as homes. And then now we have this, your property, which I'm not drawing any conclusions about artistic or architectural merit, but it does stick out. And it does not fit, what you have done does not fit in any form or fashion the character of the neighborhood, as I see it. I think his property is too small, the use is too intensive, and for that reason, I will not support granting of any kind of conditional use permit for this property,
Thank
based
you,
on
Keith.
all kinds of reasons.
Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment?
If there is none, I'll make a motion
Well,
to.
Charlie's mouth is open. He hasn't said anything yet.
I guess it's a little bit of a struggle for me because I really want to see creative ideas. I do think that this property is too small.
All we're asking for, sir, is just to be able to have friends.
I do think you can do that within permitted uses already, and I'm of the opinion I don't see the interim or conditional being appropriate in this case with the application that we've been presented. So.
You see.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to
Okay.
Let's
deny.
find out if anyone else
Well,
wishes to.
does anybody? I think we're ready for a motion.
Jerry might.
Yeah, I have some comments.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I live out that way. I live very close to Paradise Beach. My daughter has a place, property, a little bit beyond that, and I go out there occasionally, and I go by this. For years, I was going out there. I also spend a lot of time at Horseshoe Bay, monitoring boats and stuff. But all the times, for years, I was going out there and nothing. It was a nice, peaceful drive. All of a sudden, it seemed one day, there's this, what looked like a gas station or a commercial operation. And it kind of surprised me. I looked at it and I think I saw some antique farm equipment or something like that, and I thought, wow, okay. I mean, a person's entitled to display that stuff, and if that's the kind of a display they want to put on, that's fine. But having your friends come over, I've got 10 acres, and I wouldn't put 5 spots on my land for friends to come over. 2 acres with the building that size that you've got, plus the display stuff that you've got, bring in a couple of, even one RV, that might be tolerable, especially if there were conditions to keep their headlights away from neighbors and stuff like that. But 3 is way beyond the capacity of the property. And when you say friends, some of them may come up here and stay in the motels and hotels and gather on your property. Then suddenly you've got a larger gathering. We had something like that a few years ago with another property closer to town where a couple owned it, set up their own structures and stuff on it, and then during the daytime, they didn't do this at night, they had some friends come over. 150 friends come over. And this was causing consternation of some of the neighbors. And all they wanted to do is gather these people so that they could greet the Pleiadians from outer space. And actually, they were able to work out the conditions and limit the time that they used it to simply daytime hours, and they lived there themselves and nothing else. And we accommodated that. There were no cars that were going to stay overnight there. No cars could stay overnight. I think if you have your friends come over and they've got one in a single RV, that's fine. 3, no, I can't go with that, not on a 2-acre plot. It's just far too minimal.
If I may, sir, that might happen once a year. And
That's one too many.
We could get one camper pad with?
You're allowed to do that.
Well, that's all we wanted to
That's-
begin with.
You have
Why
to
did you
just,
build 3?
We didn't build 3.
I've got spots in there that I drive my cars in too in the wintertime.
Well, then,
We flattened them out and we.
Why why the porta potties and the
Well,
tent sites?
that was, Bill Lane told us that if we ever had anything there, or people staying in a tent, we had to have porta potties. That's the part that gets me.
It's an event,
okay,
I
we're
think,
gonna stop
that would need a
debating.
permit.
We're gonna
but-
stop
Yeah.
debating. I think we've resolved it.
Yeah.
I want to make a
Anyone-
motion, if there's no more discussion on the
Mike,
board.
do you have a comment?
I will make a motion to deny the conditional use permit based on the fact that we consider it not to be consistent with the neighborhood, with the size of the lot issues, and bearing in mind all the testimony that is more detailed that we received in some of these responses.
Right, I've got a couple
It's not
more.
at all consistent with the county.
Okay,
with our
so
pers-
Keith has
what we
made a
wanna do.
motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, can I ask Tim or Neva just for a quick clarification?
Sure.
I believe it is, I believe I understand, but is it true that they could have a friend or family member show up with a licensed RV camper and as long as they're not requiring a separate septic hookup or anything, they can do that without a permit as is? I want
Tim,
a
you-
little clarification there to make sure
Clarify.
what we're.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Laboda. This is one of those cases that does center around the size and the scope of the activity. I'd like to kind of use the analogy of car sales, right? So if you have used car sales, you put one car at the end of your driveway, you're selling a used car, that's permitted, there's no problem with that. You end up putting 2 or 3 cars out at the end of the driveway, then it becomes a larger scale and size of activity. You put 4 cars out, the state calls you a used car lot. So it's the same activity, it's used car sales, it's the size and the scope. Yes, you are correct, Commissioner Laboda, in the fact that if this is denied, that does not prohibit the property owner from utilizing the property in a permitted manner, which would allow for a guest to come and be able to stay on the property. It does not, where we come into play is the definitions that we have by ordinance and the reference material that we have adopted utilizes 2 or more campsites or pads or things like that, then it's a campgrounds, which is not a normally allowed use on that zone district. So,
Does that clarify?
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak?
Really quick, Madam Chair, I just wanted to add on to what Tim said, that that's under the provisions of the recreational vehicle standards in our ordinance would require that the RVs be meeting the structure setbacks. So where these pads are located, I don't know for sure that they're meeting that 10-foot setback from the property line. So those pads themselves may be not suitable for an RV to actually be placed in those spots. Also, it's not permitted for them to be used as a vacation rental or anything of that sort.
Ms. Maxwell, we would be happy to have them park up along the house.
Okay. I would just like to reference the land use plan there's a section in here that describes the vision for Highway 61 corridor and the shoreline view, since that's the main artery going through the entire Cook County. Page 20 and the land use plan, Highway 61 corridor. And this denial fits what the vision was for, from the land use plan. So I'm going to list the reasons for denial, and then we'll vote. The lot's too small. R1 allows a guest house. It doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood. Use is too intense. R1 allows visitors. Land use plan, page 20, the Highway 61 corridor.
I would like to add inadequate screening from the neighbors.
And screening.
I think, looking at the trees and stuff, I don't think that they're adequate to give that kind of protection.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everybody, all in favor of Keith's motion?
Has it been seconded?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the conditional use permit is denied.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll move. Yes?
Just a point of order, for clarification's sake, that was the interim use and not the conditional use. No, the recommendation, right?
Either one.
Is either.
And this will be heard at the county commissioners meeting, and this is a recommendation from this board to the county commission. So you might be interested in attending the county board meeting for that hearing. It's not a hearing, it's a vote. Yes.
That is correct, Madam Chair. And just to be very clear, at the County Board of Commissioners meeting where this recommendation is being brought forward, it is not a public hearing, and no public comment will be then further accepted by either the applicants or by members of the public. So this hearing portion of it is.
I need a clarification. You say where you can have just another, like a trailer next, I think you were asking that, Charlie. If you could have a trailer besides your house or a small cabin or something like that, if you own that trailer, would you be subject to having any more then? If you already have your own trailer on that?
It's set up and being used as a trailer.
Okay, Tim.
Okay, very quick in clarification on this. So we have an RV set of provisions on there, and you can have an RV permit. That RV permit can be yours, that you put on there. You can have people in there and stay. People sometimes have RVs, they never use them on their property, they just store them, and then they take them somewhere else to use them other places. The RV permit that we have is for those RVs that may be used by somebody that comes up and visited, and it's only one on the property, and as was indicated before, it cannot be used as a vacation rental, and it must meet the setback distances.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the gravel pit. And this is the Cheryl and George Humphrey gravel pit on the Ball Club Road. And Neva will have you introduce this.
We want to ask people to leave if they're going to keep talking.
Okay, why don't you exit, and we're going to work on the gravel pit here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This request is to amend the conditional use permit allowing an increase from 10 to 15 acres of active excavation in a gravel pit adjacent to Cook County 27 Ball Club Lake Road. The existing gravel pit is contained within a 42-acre parcel. The conditional use permit was approved in 1996, allowing extraction and processing of gravel from the pit. A subsequent 2001 conditional use permit allowed the establishment of a hot mix asphalt plant on the parcel, and a 2020 IUP allowed for a one-year wash plant operation. The property is zoned FAR1, non-shorelands, and in Cook County, any zone district, gravel pit operations require conditional use permit. The applicants are requesting to amend their conditional use permit to increase the allowable pit area by 5 acres to expand the operating area of the pit. Currently, the pit is allowed to have 10 acres open for excavation. The applicants would like to increase this to 15 acres. They do not propose to change the operation of the pit or the hours of operation. The applicants explain in their application that this increase in allowed acres will ensure that their contractor, Northland, will have enough product available without needing an emergency CUP mid-project. The applicants have explained that the current excavated area is not yet ready to be restored for 2 reasons. 1, there may still be materials to excavate vertically deeper, and 2, the stockpiled materials would have to be relocated in order to do restoration. This pit is included in the annual gravel pit review process and has provided all requested information in December 2021 in annual review. The Humphrey pit is contained within a prominent esker and exhibits no wetland or water resources within the pit perimeter. The surrounding landscape is notable for 3 things: water, wetlands, and other eskers. Wetlands are generally identified on the survey. The expansion area is not within these wetland areas. Zoning considerations: the property is zoned FAR1 non-shoreland. The property is remotely located and has operated as a gravel pit for over 25 years. No private property abuts the subject parcel. Access from Cook County 27 includes county and federal easements. The following conditions currently apply to this permit. I am not going to read them through because they're about a page and a half long, but they're basically listed in there because I want to be sure that if there's any approval that this body reviews to make sure those conditions still are applicable. So I made a couple of proposed edits, such as removing the Soil and Water Conservation District from the responsibility of doing restoration review, and said that would be our office, things like that. The hours of operation for this pit came up in the 2020 permit for the wash plant IUP, which kind of connected the extraction, screening, crushing, washing, that the hours of operation would be from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, with Sunday hours granted by the planning director upon showing a need that doesn't jeopardize public health or safety. I mention that because that is kind of one of the things that came up through the public comment. Was we received 1 public comment. 29 letters of notification were sent out, but the 1 comment that we did receive during the timeline was primarily concerned about noise and the hours of operation. And if trying to understand whether or not this was intensifying the use, if they would hear more machinery. And then I did receive 1 comment after the comment deadline that's not included in your packets, just because our written comment period closed. And I did pass out the Northland memo that the applicants provided to respond to some of the concerns from the public comment period. Just to maintain consistency with how we process things in between this public comment closure and the hearing start time. I'm more than happy to read this out if you guys would like. Otherwise, I told Cheryl that she could take it from there, and I can help out if needed to pass this information along to you if it's needed.
Okay, thank you. And is the applicant prepared to speak? Okay.
Yes.
Name and...
My name is Cheryl Humphrey.
Okay, and kind of get closer to the microphone.
Cheryl Humphrey.
There you go. Thank you.
And my husband, George Humphrey.
Okay. And do you have things you wish to add to the commentary narrative?
Well, I got in my email on Thursday a letter of Susan, I don't know, Schubert? I had grabbed the wrong letter. She actually, every time we have a CUP, sends a letter. So I grabbed the one from the wash plant IUP that we did. She is requesting a change of hours from 8:30 to 4:30, which is just, I don't know any pit operation that does big jobs that would operate from 8:30 to 4:30. That's just not how it works. And if you had to make it that way, the roads would take like double the money. I mean, it's already horrendous. I guess it's just hard having a gravel pit and have people ask that you not make noise, or I don't know what she hears. Last year, we had nothing going on. We're not screening ourselves anymore or crushing. We sold our stuff. And I have a lease agreement with Northland, and they're in our pit, and that goes to the end of 2023. So 2 years ago, they did all the wash material for the Grand Portage job, huge job. And there was, at one time, like 25 trucks going in and out. That's life, you know, in big pit operations. Northland is, they run their pit, or their pit procedures are perfect. They don't cross the line, they don't, they think about what they're doing, and they have plans in place in case this would happen. I mean, they're a really good company, and they don't have problems. We've had Euland in there also, and, you know, they run a good operation, and this has to happen. You have to have washed gravel, or two, it kind of, Jeremy Carlson, the project manager from Northland, pointed out that when you haul the material up there, that's a mix of many different types of gravel. You know, they crush, and then there's like these scientists that analyze it, and it has to be clean, but I mean, there's specs that are just unbelievable. You don't just crush material and haul it out in a belly dump. So there's lots of different piles of gravel, and you know, that's what is on the 10 acres. And as he wrote in the letter, you have to have a pattern of traffic going in and out. I mean, if people could see it, it's unbelievable. If you have the crew, and then you have people loading, you know, these belly dumps, if you don't do it safely, you know, accidents could happen. So you can't just like ram people together, and you can't pick up these piles and just like move them. You know, that's just not, I feel like the person who wrote the letter, she really has like no idea. And I don't know what your knowledge would be, except for Charlie.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I think we've all read the materials, and I think, unless there's something else you want to comment on?
I guess.
There's another thing too, you know, as the pit grows, we've got it now, we've got it down to the floor of the pit. You know, it's probably 40 feet deeper than I started out, so if they get another crusher in now, we can get it to the bottom of the pit where, you know, your noise is not going to go out anymore.
Right.
Because it's going to be down in a hole.
Okay, thank you.
And that lady that was complaining, they're a mile and a half away. They're going to get more noise by a car or truck driving up and down Pine Mountain Road than they're going to hear from that pit.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask you to, first I'm going to ask, does someone wish to speak from the public?
I did have one other thing. In the IUP for the wash plant, just for the record, that was not a 1 year. It was, I think it was issued in June, and it was only for that season till November, I think was how. So it's not we didn't have it for a year.
Okay.
Just so it isn't
All right.
written that way.
Okay, anyone from the public here to speak? Okay, we'll close it to the public. Does someone wish to speak from the commissioners?
I will.
Okay,
I would like to see gravel pits in one area. I don't want to see little pits all over the county. So I would approve this to stay in that area and give them the 5 acres they want.
Okay.
To continue use. It's important.
Okay. And Keith?
I will address the time, hours of operation. I was in the contracting and building business. My father had his own excavating business, so I know a little bit about how things work. And we have a short season in Minnesota, as everybody knows, and it's even shorter up here than the one my father faced down near Stillwater. So that 7 o'clock in the morning to the afternoon is not unreasonable at all. I mean, to get the work done and to get it in the shorter season we have. I will support
Okay.
the addition, because, and I think the noise issue, the hours of operation are fine with the longer hours of operation.
Okay, anyone else care to speak? Jerry?
I do have
Charlie?
multiple comments. First off, I support the expansion, everything you've said. When we've been expanding and amending, we've been looking at wetland delineation in any area near the pit property, and that even though this one doesn't exhibit wetland features, there can be, for lack of a better term, I don't remember the geological term, but basically a puddle, which is a nuisance, but the pits that have expanded have had to do that. So I would suggest that we add a few conditions, one of them being a wetland delineation and groundwater monitoring, which is establishing the static groundwater level so that so that we can be sure that you're not impacting it, and be sure that if you go for washing again, that you can monitor that quality of the groundwater. So the other would be that other than washing, you would maintain a 2-foot separation from the established groundwater. Through those monitoring wells, you'll determine the average, it fluctuates a lot, determine the average static groundwater level and stay 2 feet above it, and that the site would get a SWIP that meets the Cook County Stormwater Plan, which Northland can zip that stuff out.
Okay, anyone else?
I would
Jerry?
suggest that. I mean,
Right.
I think George and Cheryl should have the opportunity to comment on that, but that is what the pits that have expanded have had those added in.
But we don't have a wash plant permit. So why couldn't you do that if you do it?
Because you need to establish that you're not going into that, it's the 2-foot separation. And
We're not
unless you're
doing
going in the
anything this
groundwater-
year. There's nothing, we're not doing anything. I don't understand why I would have to, or Northland would have to produce and do that testing when, and honestly, we won't own it very much longer. It's gonna be in someone else's name.
Right.
So I don't understand why you would
But that's
make us
even more
do all
important
those
to have a
things.
baseline, to know where this stuff
so
is, so
you're
you don't dig
establishing a
into the water
baseline.
table.
Well, I get,
We haven't. They dug into it for the wash plant. and
Right.
They covered it all in again last fall.
Yeah.
we ran a wash plant with, I don't have the acre, 100,000 yards of material, was
Okay.
washed. And
If
there was not a
If we
problem.
have not established a baseline, then there's no way to establish.
I don't,
whether
and maybe
there's
we
a
have, I don't
violation.
know. So what are you asking, that,
Well, we're
That-
gonna talk as a board here. Jerry, do you have,
No, I think he's got a point there, and I just,
and I,
This is what Stan's had to do it, I've had to do it. This is what we've required it of the county when they expanded the Maple Hill pit or proposed it. This is what we've been doing with pits.
but that was because you wanted to have a wash plant.
No, this was before wash plant. Wash plant's a completely separate permit.
I've gotten all my permits. Why wouldn't have Bill Lane asked for this to be
You're
done? I
asking
just
for an
can't.
expansion, and we're saying that there's some potential controls that need to be added for an expansion.
When we had the other two expansions, no one ever said
okay.
anything about that. I
We're-
mean,
we're
it's
not
just
gonna
adding on
argue.
all this stuff. It's like, why?
Yes, Ann?
I think if you just mention it to Northland, they'll know right exactly what's going on, and they'll get you through it. I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, we're just excavating gravel. Basically, we're 2
Right,
feet
just-
above the
just-
water table.
just
We're not
mention-
digging down into
yeah.
that. We're-
Okay, we're not gonna debate.
Okay.
Ann has a comment.
No, I was just going to support that I think Northland could
Okay.
certainly do that.
Does anyone wish to make a motion or further comment?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
That we approve it with the conditions as stated.
And the staff and with Charlie?
Yes.
Okay, if we're going to change things, can we add a condition of operating hours of 6 in the morning till 9 at night, like Charlie? They got that in their wash plant that had like no end. a forever wash plant
Well, a lot of
permit.
jobs depends, they've had jobs up there where they crush 24 hours a
They-
day,
yeah,
depending on
we
the
had
job
lights.
and how much.
Okay,
material they needed.
we're.
I mean, you're
we've
adding
got a
all these
motion on
things
the
that we're
table,
gonna,
I hear you.
And the board is setting conditions. So let's set the conditions that we're gonna vote on.
I don't, I mean, the issue, I guess, is, my father, I used to be a farmer. And we used to work from dawn to dusk, sun up to sundown. It's not uncommon. And so, I don't know if we we could add longer hours. But certainly, I don't think it's a big issue. I could see maybe, I don't know.
Do we have
9 at
a
night.
second on the motion?
Pardon?
We haven't finished the motion.
Okay.
We're working on the
All right.
motion.
We're still discussing conditions, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We're listing conditions for a
Yeah, that's
motion.
fine.
The issue was brought up about extending the hours of operation.
Part of
If that makes more economic sense for the extra hoops that we're asking you to jump through, I think that's a fair
Yeah,
trade-off.
yeah.
And part of the hours is traffic. If it's dusk and dark and the sun's going down, depending on which direction you're driving, you can't see a dump truck.
A lot of times
Well-
they're talking about if they were gonna crush, they'd just crush, they wouldn't be hauling.
Yeah.
Usually they go into the crusher and
Yeah.
they make all these piles and then they move that stuff out and then they'll just take out of those stockpiles.
And it changes with as the,
Right.
so I mean, I would, to the staff's considerations and those brought up by Mr. Laboda, I would add that a condition that the hours of operation could go from 6 until 6. Does that seem reasonable?
no, because a little Boda pit gets 6 to 9.
Oh,
So if
okay.
we're changing
All right.
conditions, I mean, they got it in their
Well,
wash
from
plant,
6 to
the
9.
forever wash plant.
Madam Chair?
We got
Yes.
it for 5 months.
I don't believe there's a consistent time between any of the gravel pits, at least that I am aware of.
It
So,
might be due to the road and the neighborhood and
correct.
some of that, so.
So I would
9 seems a little long because most times it's dark by then.
Well, then leave it 8. I mean, Northland isn't going to quit at 6 o'clock, I can tell you.
okay, well, then,
That's not how
Why,
these
why
operations
longer hours,
work.
I don't mean to.
Right,
why
I
longer
didn't
hours on
understand
this
that.
pit would work is they are, like I said, the nearest neighbor is an hour and a half, or a mile and a
Right.
half away, and that's similar to ours, and that's why
Right.
we got the extended hours, is we're not really impacting the neighborhood by
Okay.
those extended hours, so I.
so what is the timeframe going to be, from 6 to 9?
6 to 8 would be fine.
6 to 8?
I would settle,
Okay.
that's fine.
So I will add that
We won't.
condition to
And
the
Charlie,
ones of
you
Mr.
wanna add-
Laboda's.
Wells to monitor.
Well, his 3.
A requirement of a wetland delineation and 2, it doesn't have to be extensive, it's 2 groundwater wells, and it's really simple, I mean,
And Northland
you're
would take
basically
care of
going
it.
to where you know that, just inside the edge of the wetland. I mean, Neva could explain, it, but you're just going in so you can measure what that average groundwater elevation is, so that we would know then if there's an impact to the groundwater, and you would also, by developing those wetland boundaries, we know then that there's an enforceable, you are meeting the 50-foot setback, not, we're guessing that it's roughly here on the setback. So that's why they put it on ours.
Okay.
Those were all the.
But you had trouble with water,
don't
and we
have
never
any-
had trouble
we
with
don't
water.
have any
And that's
trouble
why
with water in
Bill
our-
Lane, no one
Okay.
ever
Don't have
made us
trouble
We're
do
not
with water
that.
in our
discussing, we're
upland
done
areas.
discussing, we're gonna
Well-
vote now with those conditions. So the motion's been made, has it been seconded?
No.
And I guess I will restate, and you guys can choose what you, I'm only one member, and I'm only making a statement, so we don't have to go with these, but this is what, very similar to what Stan and I have had to do.
Well, they seem reasonable.
Wetland delineation, groundwater inspection wells. Ours that, I possibly agree that it doesn't, so the 2-foot separation it is a requirement on ours. The reason being is, I think, arbitrary. I think you should be able to excavate, but on ours, it's specified that the restoration has to go back to 2 feet. Now, we had some, I shouldn't get into ours specifically.
No.
So I don't know that that one really has to be in there, but as long as the groundwater wells are, and we know that there's no impact to it, that meets the requirement of all the other BS that I had to go through.
Okay.
And the SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, meeting the Cook County Stormwater Ordinance.
Well, we had one, but they can't find it in the files. They got
Okay,
lost.
so we're not discussing anymore with you.
Well, I mean, all this stuff
But
is
then
coming up.
adding
I would have had
6
Northland here had I known that all this would come up.
Yeah.
6
Well,
to 8 is ours.
Do you want us to table it until they can come?
I would
We
just,
could do that.
just be quiet. It'll work.
Well,
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I double check on the hours? So it was Monday through Saturday, and it was Sunday can be granted upon the planning director. Are we still okay with that part, the days of the week?
Cheryl, would you nod to that? Monday through Saturday?
Yep,
Or-
the days of the week, that's still okay, right? The Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday was, if you guys need it, you can ask for it, and we can just make that determination
Yeah.
administratively.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. All right. Motion's made with those conditions and the ones spelled out in the narrative. And we need a second,
I'll second it.
couple of them. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. So, okay. You got, motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't know.
I'll do it, though.
All right. You're on, Jerry. They're dwindling.
Okay, let's take a couple minutes here for a break.
We turned him down his.
I got all these signed.
Thank you.
Are we going to take a break? Or-
Yeah, we are right now.
Okay.
We have not started the Board of Adjustment meeting yet.
Did you want to get one of these?
Okay, we're still live, so. No, I'm not supposed to talk to you.
Not about these matters, no. But did you want one of these guys? Yeah, they're down here.
I'll get it. All right.
I wonder how long it's going to take before we hear from the attorney for that other day.
So the right mic on
These
the
mics are
corner.
live.
Yeah.
See
Huh?
that?
The mics are live.
Tenta's name,
We're not talking.
Yeah,
You
we'll
can
be-
talk all you want, I'm being quiet.
You're out of here?
Talk about the
Out
weather.
of that board.
So,
Nice to meet you.
You bet.
Where did Tim go?
I'll be here
He had another meeting.
next month.
All righty.
Right.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
with the
Good night, everybody.
beef
Good
steak.
night. Have a good drive.
Have a good night,
Are we
Mike.
satisfied with the break?
It looks like
I'd
everybody's
sooner
here.
just
Nobody took.
get
I
out of
just
here.
need to stand
Okay,
up,
well,
stretch.
I thought maybe somebody would want to get up and take a minute, but since we haven't, I'll call to order the Board of Adjustment for this month. And the first issue is to approve the agenda and minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve both.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and adopt the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. All right, first, ongoing business. Keith and Julia Miller. After the fact variance relief from the Lake Superior ordinary high water level setback distance for the existing deck of the home at 30 Gunderson Lane, parcel ID 20-280-0070.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicants originally requested an after-the-fact variance relief for the existing 425-foot square foot deck on the dwelling at 30 Gunderson Lane in Schroeder. After further review of historical documentation, they've modified their request and are now requesting approval for a 200 square foot deck. I've included a timeline in the staff narrative, which you all have. Basically, the cabin was constructed in 1960, and in 1981, assessor records indicate the deck was 112 square feet. Then in 1998, assessor records indicate the deck was enlarged a bit with an entry roof overhang and post. The applicant suggests this measurement is probably about 160 to 170 square foot. And then in 2010, the deck was enlarged to 425 square feet. The current owners purchased the property last year and realized that the deck was unpermitted and contacted our office to rectify the situation. After I've worked with them to find these assessor records, they've revised their request to ask for partial deck approval. Instead of the whole 425 square foot, they're asking for 200 square feet to be allowed to remain. The deck wraps around the cabin, and you can see in the photos that it did historically wrap around the cabin at that point in time. The deck is very close to Lake Superior, as is the whole cabin. It is within an area that's identified as a high erosion susceptibility of Lake Superior, so the vegetation is very important to be maintained in between the cabin and the deck and the lake. Staff recommendation is to recognize that the applicants have voluntarily requested to minimize the existing deck down to 200 square feet. I think that's quite notable. And they've also indicated that they're going to install new gutters and downspouts to direct stormwater away from the shore and improve native vegetative buffer as recommended in the staff narrative for the original variance request. Reducing this impervious surface coverage within the shore impact zone is quite favorable and shows a good faith effort to provide a reasonable variance request. If approved, a condition could be considered which would require a native vegetative buffer to remain. This would primarily serve for future property owners to understand the vegetative buffer is a condition of approval for the deck and must be maintained. Our office sent out 14 letters from the original request to adjacent property owners. One written comment was received from the neighbor, and that was in support of the original request. And then the Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District provided an updated comment on the revised request.
Thank you. First thing we'll do is open the issue to the floor, or is either Keith or Julie Amelia here? Okay, or a representative. Yeah. Go ahead. Step up to the mic. And
I'm Andy Campbell, the architect on the project and the agent for Kenny and Julia Miller, who are the owners of the property. I don't have much to add to Neva's description, other than just to kind of reiterate that my clients purchased the property in December and weren't aware that this deck had been unpermitted. Our original request as part of this remodeling and addition project was to keep the existing deck, but then we had received some of that visual photo evidence just a couple days before last month's meeting and thought, in light of that and the fact of the suggestions from the report, that it would make sense to kind of propose a compromise or to scale back our proposal to reduce the deck to about 200 square feet, trying to get closer in line with the size of the deck from the 90s, but try to keep a bit of usable space like it exists now. And we're fully on board with the suggestions of preserving the native buffer between the deck and the shoreline, and the gutters, directing runoff away from the lake shore as much as possible, which don't exist today, I believe, or at least there's not much overhang. I can't remember if there's a gutter there now or not. So we're trying to put back the property better than it is currently, and do our best to propose a reasonable request here.
okay, thank you. Are there any others in the room that have a comment to make in this? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'll close the floor and bring it to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question of the architect.
Yep.
Our plan here, the one that we have in our packet, that shows the original large deck.
Let's see, so there's a couple different drawings. I guess the sheet L 2.0 shows more precisely the existing deck is the dashed line, and then the proposed deck is shaded gray in that smaller footprint.
If you go down to page 22, that's where those are added.
Page 22?
22 and 23. 23 will show a zoomed-in version. too.
All right.
Yeah, so the new deck is going to be that shaded gray.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Is there any practical difficulty with the land that would prevent building a deck that meets the setbacks?
Yeah, if you can see the existing, or the 40-foot setback line is shown kind of a dot dash dot line. Almost the entire, existing cabin is built over that setback. So there's no kind of reasonable area that we could find to put that deck that would be outside of the setback. And there's always been some kind of door facing the lake. We're moving the location of the door facing the lake, which is why we have we're able to shorten that leg of the deck. But, we need to provide at least, at the minimum, kind of egress and ingress from that door, which is up a few feet from grade.
My other question, I guess, would be to Neva, are any of these additions to the deck and that addition to the roof, were any of those done through the variance process? So it's been
Well, yeah, the 2010 would have been the one that triggered, that should have.
Right, but all the other alterations were also done with no variances, right?
1984 is when the ordinance went in place that would have had any of those structural setbacks. So the original 112-foot square deck was there in 1981, so before that zoning went in place, there at least was a deck there pre-zoning.
So that would be the picture of the 98, where you indicate 1998 deck? That would be that original one?
It's kind of like that one. Well, sorry, so the 1998 one is the bottom photo, the 1981 is the top photo on page 6. So the top photo is
right.
What we would have pre-zoning. Now, we don't know exactly what happened between 1981 and 1998.
So then they made a number of alterations without.
The previous owners.
Yeah, right. I mean, putting the roof and extending all that before the latest iteration of it.
Yeah, I'd say the 2010 one is probably the most significant enlargement that should have known about the variance request.
Well, when I took the 2 online workshops on shoreline variances a short while ago, they stressed in the workshops that an application for variance had to meet all the requirements. And one of the requirements is there a practical difficulty with the land? Is there a rock outcrop, a bluff, a wetland, any sort of thing with the land that would prevent building a deck? And I see where you're going to do an addition to the back entrance. And even if we, as I look at this, so I don't see any practical difficulty. And would it be possible to give, if we were to grant a variance for a larger deck, could it be somewhere in that back corner where you've got the entrance to this new entrance to extend the deck out a little bit somewhat into the, beyond the line? It'll still put it much farther back from the lake.
Right. I guess a question for Neva is, we're showing in good faith our proposed addition, which has not been permitted or applied for a permit yet because we have to approve this deck. Should that not go through for some reason, then there's really I think these are independent questions of each other, like the issue of the deck. And in its current state, the current configuration of the doors, it would not make sense to move that deck to the back. I can see the argument of moving it further from the shore, certainly.
You would be allowed to have the entranceway with stairs.
Okay, yeah, and that was another concern, right?
No,
right.
I think that's allowed. It's just a question of adding the deck. And
Sure.
as I looked at it, I thought, well, you're going to do this new entrance, and you have some steps and so on, well, it would be kind of logical to me, you could extend this out, we could give you a variance for that chunk that would extend.
Sure.
The deck could even go at an angle out from the house. I mean, there's a number of different ways, so that it would if there was some practical difficulty that was in the land that prevented you from doing that, it would be another matter.
Sure.
But this comes down to what is a personal preference, and that was very clearly stated in the workshop, that there's a very distinct difference between what a personal preference is and what a practical difficulty that's inherent in the land is. So.
I see. In my opinion, our practical difficulty lies in the siting of the cabin that we're trying to, preserve and not tear down, and it's putting a deck in the appropriate location for that cabin that's there, which we're trying to work with. I could maybe see the argument that that's a difference from the land itself, I guess.
I'm pretty confused. So what the variance is for is the 4-foot strip across the front of the cabin, lakeside?
It would be for the entire deck.
Entire deck.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're permitted without a variance to have a entrance
Right.
with a platform, as it is.
Mr. Chair? I think if this was to be denied, we would go back to the 1981 and 98 photos, and we would try to identify what those boundaries. So that original deck, I just want to clarify because we talked about the lakeside. So there was historically a decking on that lakeside. So if this was denied, this wouldn't be removing definitely that section of the deck.
Well, yeah, it's more of a walkway than a deck. It's designed as an easy access to the building and to wash the windows and things like that. It's too narrow. I don't know what the scale is, but
440.
But it's.
The existing one from the 81 and 98 photos is a little bit wider than 4 feet. I think it's 5'6".
Is it that
So
wide?
Is it still there on the house?
And it's 425
It's been
square
incorporated
foot
in the new deck.
footprint is there right
Built.
now, yeah.
Oh,
See, they added,
Okay.
when they did they just rebuilt it and made it bigger.
so you're proposing to take it back?
I guess I would suggest that we're, first off, not really here to redesign this. We're here to talk about what's proposed. And then if we deny it, then they can redesign it and come back. The practical difficulty that I may see, and admittedly, I did not visit the site, so I could be proven wrong, but what I'm seeing in these photographs is that by moving the deck where, if I understand you correctly, Keith, where you're suggesting, the practical difficulty, we'd be starting to look at impacting the root zones of the vegetation that looks like it's really important up just above the lawn there. So that to me is a practical difficulty. Also, given that the deck's already there, and we're talking about reducing the footprint, they've definitely shown a willingness and an understanding of what the concerns are. So I guess that would be, I really am in favor of it as it's presented to us today.
Judy, anything more on your side?
Historically, you can repair and maintain if the deck is there. They've enhanced it without a variance. And you're willing to cut it back to basically what it was?
Slightly larger than what it was before, but
Okay.
cut it less than more than half of its current size.
Yeah, okay, it was 112.
Okay.
Madam, or Mr. Chairman, if I may, just briefly, we still have to apply the standards that are supposed to be applied. And one of them is there a practical difficulty in the land that would prevent you from meeting the setbacks?
All due respect, Keith, I think that we have some differences on that some people accept a practical difficulty. There's also the condition of the original deck and the effort to reduce that back to that when it was overbuilt. And this is all initiated by the property owner. I think that we have a reasonably willing partner here, and I'm not sure that the condition warrants chopping it off or moving it around someplace else. It fits into the rest of the design. To deny it and make them move that around to someplace else starts to change all sorts of dimensions of this particular property.
And the practical difficulty on the land itself, and this is the part I can't verify because I have not been on the site, but if I'm looking at a tree and I'm looking at a shadow, and I can't tell where the shadow ends, where the tree ends and the shadow ends, but the root zone is, if we move it back towards the side of this cabin, you're looking at impacting the root zone, which is a big part of what's holding the rock, top of that rock together, behind that cabin.
Yeah, but that's right where they're gonna do the remodeling,
So they
Charlie.
gotta remodel here, what, the picture I'm looking at, and I may be wrong, as I said, but I'm
No.
looking at this one right here, and we've
This
got this
is-
tree here
this is
that we're.
In this area
So-
here.
So I would say that's a reasonable, if we want to really consider the details of meeting that standard, I believe we can.
I don't
by
think
looking at the root
the
zone of
tree
those
does,
trees.
because I think it's kind of probably be right when they're excavating the footings for the addition and everything else. You know, when they're coming off the back of that cabin. I mean, you know, that, and you know pretty well that when you start disturbing the soil around these trees, it's whether, you know, see, this is the addition that's gonna come here, and that tree is right in this area here, it probably will go.
No, I'm judging by the photo I'm looking at, but I mean, if that tree or what looks like vegetation, it looks like we've got a yard and we've got more, and I don't remember, Soil and Water could give me a better term for that type of vegetation there versus that, and impacting these roots in this section here, is more
Well,
detrimental.
But it
than-
still preserves more of the vegetation to the shoreline, if we were, you know. And it's a matter of a personal preference, I think, more than a practical difficulty as the ordinance is, so.
All right, you've expressed your opinion. Is there a motion on this?
Mr. Chair, do you guys want to go through the findings after you make a motion or currently?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a copy? Is
Yeah,
there one in
they're-
here? I didn't
They're on
see-
page 11. of
Oh,
the
okay. I was
packet.
looking for it and I missed it.
Yeah.
The other, one other consideration, it's not a practical difficulty, but you need to egress.
They have those, Judy. They're permitted by law to have those steps and small porches. That's part of, you can do that already. So that's not, I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is the question of the deck.
One other maybe nuance on that, but having the deck keeps the foot traffic off of and not having a aggregate exposed
There you go.
right next to the rock.
They like boardwalks. This is just a higher up boardwalk. I'll make a motion, we approve the variance request.
It's been moved to, with the conditions?
The conditions
Okay.
stated by the,
All right.
Second.
Charlie, second. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
I think
All
we
right,
should
let's
go through the
Yeah,
list.
that
Yeah.
would, what I was going to get to. All right. This is a request for an after-effect variance from relief from Lake Superior ordinary high water level setback for 200 square feet on the existing deck of a home at 30 Gunderson Lane. One, is the variance consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive use guide plan and in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the Cook County zoning ordinance? Is there agreement on that?
Inasmuch as the ordinance is also instructs us to take care to preserve the environment, I think there is somewhat of a conflict.
Okay.
Because of the shoreline
How do
setbacks.
others feel about that? Personally, I don't see the conflict in this particular case.
If it weren't there, I mean, it's there, and, you know, to remove it might create more problems than actually leaving it in place.
Yeah, I see the removal of it creating a potential for harsher runoff directly to the soils below. the deck itself acts as a buffer from that and creates a splash zone, reducing the potential for erosion. So that's why I'm not swayed by that.
Are the pictures of the red house,
Those are the current
that's what it looks
photos.
like currently?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Well, the plan also instructs us that we have to consider and the DNR workshop that I took says we
Well,
also have to
this is not
consider-
this is not a wood shop.
No, let me finish what I made.
We're trying to answer some questions here, and
I'm going to go on point here. I'm not going to go drifting off. But part of what is concerning is the visual impact from the lake, and we never seem to take give that enough weight, and that is one of the major considerations that the DNR has in granting shoreline variances. And
Okay.
the more and more encroachment, the less, the greater the visual impact. So, I mean, that's something that's also, a consideration.
I would disagree that it has an impact in that sense, though. It's been there since, 1981 in any case, and the visual impact is already in place. This would not harm that visual impact in any way that I can see.
Well, it will increase
it actually improves it. Next is the proposed use of the property allowed on the land use district in which the property is located.
Yes.
Yes. Is the property owner proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the Cook County zoning ordinance?
I believe
Yes.
so.
Okay. Has the property owner established that the practical difficulty involved is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner? And I think that one's pretty clear because the property sets conditions for it. It's been in place there for some time. To disturb that would actually create more harm, I believe, to the environment. So I think that it does demonstrate and satisfy that condition.
I just want to go on the record as saying that I do not agree with that assessment.
Okay. Do other members of this board feel the same way? Okay, hearing none, I'll assume that most of us don't necessarily accept that particular view. In light of that, all the conditions have been made, the discussion is now complete. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approval with the conditions as stated signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. New business. Austin Danachik for the property located at 195 Loon Lake Road, Grand Marais, Minnesota. This variance application includes two requests. A request to place a 400 square foot addition onto the existing grandfathered non-conforming cabin 0 feet from the bluff setback and 90 from the ordinary high water level of Loon Lake. And B, a request to place a 12 by 8 water-oriented accessory structure 15 feet from the ordinary high water level of Loon Lake. Neva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant purchased the property in 2016. The property includes a 1.18 acre with approximately 245 feet of Loon Lake shoreline. Property is within the Lakeshore Residential Zone District and is a part of the Loon Lake Home Sites Plat, a 1990 DNR plat, which converted state lease lots into private ownership. The parcel exhibits moderate to steep slopes within 20 to 35% and bluff features. The applicant's requesting to place the 400 square foot addition onto the existing 380 square foot grandfathered non-conforming cabin to allow for additional living space for his family to live at the property year-round. Currently, the 380 square foot cabin is a one-room cabin. The addition will create a separate bedroom space as well as office space. Mr. Danisic lived at the cabin year-round from 2016 to 2020 and has used it seasonally since. The addition would allow Mr. Danisic and his family to live at the cabin year-round. The cabin addition is proposed not to encroach any further towards the lake. The cabin was constructed in 1971. At the time of purchase, a small 320 square foot cabin and supporting 300 square foot deck were in place. Subsequent to his purchase, a 300 gallon privy vault was installed, bringing the property into septic compliance. In 2020, a variance was approved granting a screen porch enclosure of the existing deck. In addition, the applicant is requesting to place a water-oriented accessory structure 15 feet from the shoreline of Loon Lake. The property has a bluff feature between the cabin and the shoreline. The water-oriented accessory structure would allow users to easily access and store items closer to the water at the base of the steep slope. The applicant proposes to build the structure with lumber to minimize shiny materials and use earth tone stain. I've provided the Minnesota state rules which provides criteria for water-oriented accessory structures when they may be permitted as allowed by local ordinances. The Cook County zoning regulations do not permit water-oriented accessory structures, therefore a variance is required to place such a structure. I just included that information in case if you're interested in seeing what the state standards would be if our ordinance did permit it. Considerations. The addition to the cabin is proportionally a large addition due to the small square footage of the existing cabin. The total proposed size for the cabin is a modest-sized cabin for a family to live in year-round. It is favorable that the applicant has proposed the addition to not further encroach on the lake setback. The applicant cites in his application that his goal is to allow his family to live and work at the property while maintaining the character and feel of the living in the boreal forest. The applicant proposes to add gutters with a rain barrel catch system to manage stormwater runoff from the cabin. The concern raised by 2 written comments with regard to the water-oriented accessory structures setting precedent can be addressed by the fact that each variance is evaluated by its own merits and identifying a practical difficulty. A variance approval does not set precedent for neighboring properties. The bluff feature on this property may be identified as a practical difficulty. If approved, conditions may be set to address that no storage of hazardous materials or such as fuels may be required. The following are potential conditions of approval for the cabin addition. One, well, I'm not going to go through them. They're listed. You can go through them if you wish. And I also listed potential conditions of approval for the water-oriented accessory structure. We sent out 16 notices to adjacent property owners. We received, I also have technical comment memos from Mitch Everson and Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District. 2 responses were received from the public. Both were in support of the cabin addition and both were opposed to the water-oriented accessory structure primarily due to setting precedent. And I did receive 1 comment after the deadline. And I do believe our applicant is calling in from Greenland. So I believe he's on the call line, Mr. Chair.
From Greenland?
Mm-hmm, the country.
Okay.
Right. Okay, thank you, Neva. I'd like to, if he has any comments, we'd certainly like to hear them.
Austin, are you
The
on the line?
leader has unmuted your line.
Hello, this is Austin Danisic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep, they can hear you. Go ahead.
Excellent. Yeah, no, Neva covered everything that I'm requesting, and I'd love to hear what you think. I hope I did my best to make this request reasonable, thank you.
Okay, and nothing further on that then? Is there anybody in the room that wishes to add comment to this? No reaction? We'll take it under advisement to the board now, and so it's closed to the floor. Board, comments?
Well, I guess I can support this because of the nature of the land, which really constrains what can be accomplished. I have no problems with the addition to the cabin. The structure by the lake, the storage building, I guess, without having been on the site and walked from the cabin to the lake, I really have no idea how tricky that is.
Pretty steep.
Yeah.
How far?
How far from the lake?
How far from the cabin to the lake?
90 feet, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's 90 feet on horizontally, but you're kind of going up a walkway up the bluff.
Are there stairs or handrails or anything along there?
Kind of handmade.
But
Well,
there are
I guess, Austin, can you hear these questions? You want to answer them? Sorry.
Yep, no, there's no stairs, there's just a path. There's some handmade railings.
How about a dock?
I think you might have to.
There is a dock. Yep, there is a dock already on the property.
Okay. Would the addition of some sort of stairway eliminate the need for the building to make it easier to carry things up and down the hill? I mean, you can park your canoes and boats on the shore without any kind of variance, and this building is too small for that. It's just for, life preservers, paddles, that kind of thing, fishing gear, I would imagine.
Well, it's a big dock.
Austin, did you hear that?
Yep, yep, that's correct. It's just it would be paddles, life jackets, fishing rods.
I think the question was if you improve the stairway, would that remove the need for the water right accessory structure?
I mean, it would be a creation of the stairway. I think this is it's probably the easier of the two options.
Maybe you can be a little more specific about what you would use the accessory water structure for. What would you actually be storing in there?
I've got a couple canoes and I have a rowboat, so I'd be storing paddles, life jackets, fishing gear, probably a couple chairs for that we set up on the dock, and that's about it.
No motor oil, gasoline, or anything like that?
No, I don't really like motorboats.
Okay. I noted that there was some concern by some of the other people on the lake about some of the things that people might store in them, and gasoline was mentioned as a potential hazard that can contaminate the lake. So if we build this structure, we'll not be housing anything that would be a contaminant in the soil or water in the area. Is that correct?
But the next guy might.
That
This
is
a
correct.
variance.
No contaminant.
Okay. Board, any other questions?
Well, excuse me. I know that each variance is considered on its own merits, but I do think the concerns of the other lake homeowners that have responded do make a point. One of the reasons we don't allow these in the normal course of events is that we don't want to encourage them. And I think if there were an undue hardship with carrying paddles and life preservers and that kind of thing, approximately 90 feet from the hill to the lake, then I think you could maybe make a case for it. But I'm really concerned that I know we're not going to necessarily set a precedent, but how do we respond when the next owner on the lake comes in?
Okay,
I mean, that's my
Keith,
concern.
thank you. The only thing I can say to that is that we are bound essentially to not consider precedents. Though others may think that we do, each case must be taken on its own merit. If I were to be making this request, I would add in that I don't have the physical capacity to actually carry stuff up and down. Would you respond the same way to any other old gentleman trying to do the same thing?
We need to answer those questions.
Pardon?
We need to answer those questions when
Yeah,
we're
well,
making
okay.
a determination, and I
We
don't.
will answer the questions when we get to a motion.
Can we consider this with two motions? One, the variance for the cabin addition, and one for the water, the structure on the lake? Does
Well,
that make sense?
yeah, I think essentially we are, it is two parts of the same motion. We can deny part of it and accept part, or accept both or deny both. But I think they are separate items, so that's a valid question.
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance for the cabin and not approve the variance for the
Let's
building.
take each one separately and not combine them into a single then.
Okay.
So we can consider
So
the
the motion's
accessory
made.
Structure
I made a
separately.
motion, so it needs to have either a second or die.
Okay, you made, just to be, before I second, I want to make clear what I'm seconding here. You made a motion to grant the variance for the addition to the cabin
Correct.
with the consideration.
And not grant the,
Well,
the,
the chair has ruled that you can't do
Yeah,
that.
I'm requesting that you not
Are you
include
requesting a
that.
ruling, Jerry?
but I made a
Huh?
motion, it either needs to get seconded or die.
You'll probably get amended too. If you'd like to amend your motion just to be the one.
No, I just made a motion. It can
Okay,
die.
we don't have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Now there's discussion.
Can I,
Now it can be amended.
the so we would be looking at a denial on the accessory structure and approval on the cabin addition with the 4 conditions as they're presented to us, or?
Correct. That either gets voted up or down.
I'm not sure where I'm at, so.
I'd like to mix it up.
Well, I
Chair?
mean,
If I may, I did a site visit with this applicant back in February. It was pretty snowy. I skied across the lake and met him on site, and he showed me what he was thinking about. Part of the reason this water-oriented accessory structure was included in his request is that he met with Bill Lane on site a year or two ago, and Bill Lane floated this idea of the water-oriented accessory structure as a variance request. Like we've mentioned, every variance request is looked at on its own merits. I do think on this property that the bluff is very prominent. The toe of the bluff is pretty clear where it starts, and if you see the photo on page 30, in the staff report, the whole black area is what falls under a bluff by the slope of it. So what I'm trying to show is that even if you go further back up, there's not a whole lot of areas on this property that are really conforming with the bluff rules. I think this property does have very unique features that if other applicants are looking to get their own water-oriented accessory structure, you're not going to see a lot of properties that look exactly like this. So I just wanted to float that idea as the person that did do a site visit and met with the person on site. It is a steep walk. I think Jerry has a point about if you're not young and spry, it's going to be tough to schlep all the stuff up and down the hill.
Okay,
I want to, as further discussion, if I may.
Okay, Keith, go ahead.
I have friends, and Neva's familiar with them, in Lake County that have a cabin at the base of a very steep hill. These people are in their 70s and late 60s, and they have kayaks and canoes and all the other usual paraphernalia. And they have a set of stairs that accesses the cabin, which is right at the water level. And they seem to manage. They have a storage building up on the top of the hill for all the stuff, that they can't store. And I think in this case, I don't think that would be unreasonable to require that
Okay.
that we not.
Judy.
not
I have a
grant this.
question. Is this water access only?
There's Austin, do you want to answer that? Sorry.
That makes a difference.
It's a seasonal road, so summertime only road.
A lot of them are.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, don't we?
Yep. I'll call the question.
Okay.
We need to vote.
Question has been called. The vote will be called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Same sign.
Aye.
Aye. We have essentially a stalemate, which we cannot have.
Well, we could
need
table it until the
What
next
I would
meeting when we
propose-
might have another member.
I would propose that we can deal with one structure and table the other one for a later date. Okay, and that's what, I would entertain a motion to approve the house structure separately without without consideration of the water accessory structure.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, where does that leave that variance request then? Is it still floating out there? Or
Keith.
if we're tabling that request, I can understand.
We have not come to tabling that request.
No,
yet.
no, I mean.
I am separating the issues for the purpose of a vote.
Right, but if we vote to, since this is one, if we vote to grant, for example, to grant the variance for the cabin, what are we doing if we don't vote on if we don't do?
No, we will table the other one.
Okay, well, that's what I was saying, we table the other one.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously, I mean, if we cannot
Well,
deal with it, we have to.
Right, okay, well, as long as that's understood.
Oh, okay,
That's what I was trying.
That's fine, we want to make things.
Yeah, that's.
Make things clearly.
Well, I will second that motion.
Okay, all right, so.
And then I will make a motion to table.
The first
Oh,
motion
that's
first.
okay.
Okay, so the motion has been made to approve the addition to the cabin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second?
You motioned, he's seconding?
I did not make a.
Well, then either way, I'll motion, I'll agree
Okay,
that,
yeah.
I think we're all in agreement on the cabin.
Right, okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the cabin structure with the conditions. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, now, to the second part of that, the accessory structure.
I will make a motion to table that. We're not going to run up into the 60-day rule here at any point, are we?
We can do extensions of that. I just urge that if you guys table things, which we've done quite a few hearings on, we really need to be specific about what you want to see when we come back. Is it just to get another voting member, or is there something that you want this applicant to look into to give you more information to help you change, make your decision?
Well, maybe a plan of the building showing the actual building elevations with
Yeah, I mean,
dimensions.
anything
So
like
we
that that
can-
might be helpful
So
or
we
beneficial.
we could make those, we want a scale drawing of a building, just the elevations, and with an exact location from the lake, and that they will become part of the record, so that if there's any question down the line that the building exceeds what we voted on, this has happened before your time, Jerry. And just so we have, and we would have the benefit of Mr. Trefel's.
Yeah, well, we will have a.
And we also need to look at the questions that we need to answer, whether we approve it or deny it. I don't think we meet the criteria to approve it.
Well, that could be, we can deal with that.
And the applicant should have the questions and prove to us why it's a good, reasonable variance.
He did cite those in his application. He went through all the test questions and answered that for each structure separately.
Okay.
Well,
Is there a modification or some definition we could put on it tonight to move it forward tonight without tabling? Could we modify the size and give him what still would function, or some definition of, really clarified, no closer than, I believe it was 15 feet drip line? Is there anything we can do with it tonight
Fair question. Any thoughts?
that would be agreeable?
Neve, you have it?
I think that's I think it's an interesting idea. I think that he's here to talk to you guys. He's awake in Greenland to answer any questions. I think if there's something that can be done to support this, I think he's interested in that. And I guess just from a technical perspective, the reason I spoke up earlier, I'm not a Board of Adjustment member, but from a technical point of view, there is unique property features here. I think that can be taken under consideration.
Okay, so the question will come back to us then, is there a type of structure that we might consider different from what's been proposed here?
Right, I mean, the applicant's already talking earth tones, seems conscious of needing to fit it into the landscape and not have it be a sore thumb. Is there, 12 by 8, in my opinion, small already, and yet is there a reduction in size that still is practical for the applicant that would work?
12 by 8 is
that would-
about 100 square feet. That's almost 10 by 10. It's
Right,
a
I
pretty
mean,
good
so-
size.
So, I mean, some reduction is reasonable. I mean,
And is there a mention of height? Is there a mention of roof? Like,
we could set that.
we could,
Yeah,
I would favor a sloped roof, a shed roof that's sloped to match the slope of the hill from the lake with something like a weathered wood architectural type shingle, no metal roofs. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that, we could do it, but then it puts us in the position of designing this person's building.
Well, we do have the applicant on the line. I mean, we can ask him if what we just suggested would be.
right. I mean, we need to have his approval for anything that we put forth.
Because if it just doesn't work, there's no sense in us approving it if it doesn't work for him.
You have a point?
Mr. Chair, I just wondered if we could have the applicant talk about specifically what items are going to go in the accessory structure to determine what an appropriate size might be. If we think this is a little large,
Okay.
what are the specific items that are going to go in it?
Thank you. And to a degree, he did when I asked what he was going to put into it. So
Austin, are you on the line still?
yeah, how much space do you need?
I am,
15 feet.
I was
How
going
much
to say, I'm very happy to accommodate whatever recommendations the board recommends for the size, the shape of the structure. I've already talked about what is going into it, so I think I put 8 by 12 on the application, and that was just 3 sheets of plywood. So I'm happy to accommodate a shed roof if that's what folks recommend, or make the size a little smaller. Like I said, it's going to be mainly paddles, life jackets, and probably 4 deck chairs that could go on the dock and the shoreline.
That could be quite a bit smaller than what we're looking at here.
I agree with what you said, Keith, about the shed roof.
Well,
really
as I
kind of
visualize it
fitting
from the
slope,
lake,
it really
to
makes
see it
sense.
blend in.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of
And
sense.
I think the total height, 6 by 8, that's not excessively big. I mean, we know all this stuff happened, fishing gear, paddles, lawn chairs, maybe a folding picnic, it all starts to accumulate. And it's nice to have it in a building rather than
Right, I think it's.
thing with
looks
a
better
blue
in
tar
building than
all over
so-
it. So if we were to do a shed roof, let's say we want, on the lakeside, we were to have a 6-foot-high sidewall with an 8-foot-high sidewall on the bluffs wall side.
Okay, let's,
Six is-
I guess what we're saying here is an overall height of the structure not to exceed 8 feet?
8 feet.
Okay. Width of the structure.
Well, if we.
It says 20 feet in this, no, that is it?
No, 12 by 8.
12 by 8.
12 by 8, yeah, okay,
So
I was looking at the wrong
if
one.
so if the building is, 12 feet long, and I assume it's going to be the long parallel to the lake, and if we had on the lake side a wall height of 6 feet, and on the bluff side a wall height of 8 feet.
Wall
See, that
height, so
lowers
we maybe
it.
want to accommodate a few inches for the rafters. So that's why if we're setting a max height.
6'6" then, and 8'6". I mean, it's.
Yeah, that should accommodate fishing gear,
And that gives them
paddles.
plenty of pitch for,
Yeah.
I mean, and then we want, okay, we're gonna specify an earth tone color, and some sort of no metal roofing, some sort of architectural shingle in an earth tone color, because that breaks it up.
And yes,
It's
the color of
dappled
it
color, like a weathered
should
wood.
blend into the
A
landscape.
weathered wood shingle would, the color, GAF uses a weathered wood that would be perfect, because it would blend right in with the rock.
Cedar shingles.
Well, those aren't, they're not practical down there, because
think
they'll
we-
go to hell in no time with all the moss.
I don't think maybe we want to say what. he's
No, I-
with, but I think in the suggested potential condition number 2 for this, shall be earth toned with no shiny material.
Yes.
I mean, that really really allows them to do something and be creative and decide what's the right materials to use.
Well, in a
But
brown,
needing that it can't be shiny, it's gotta be earth tone. I mean, I think that seems.
And I might suggest that there, to whatever extent we can, to add any plantings that might disguise it a little bit.
Well, that's going to be, there's not much distance between
There's
that and a
not,
lake.
there's not much, but we
There
could check.
probably isn't a lot of even soil there, is there?
It's a lot of, yeah, I would say you may have a tough time planting stuff.
Okay.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
cedar, it's a lot
I
of.
haven't
natural
seen it. I was
vegetation.
thinking maybe soil and water could take an opinion to see if there's something that they could
Yeah.
recommend for it.
I mean, it's pretty natural shoreline right now.
Okay.
But,
Well, that says say the natural shoreline should be maintained.
yeah.
That's, proposed condition one, shoreline vegetation shall remain in place to provide visual screening, from the lake. So,
Okay.
And I think if that's covered in one, earth tone and non-shiny material in two, the fuel and no storage of fuel and, or other hazardous materials within it is number three. So I think what we would be looking at is proposing we talked about proposing a size, a max size for the structure. and
I
seeing
think
if
12
this
by
would-
8 with a 6'6" sidewall on the lake side and an 8'6" sidewall on the bluff side with a shed, simple shed
And
roof.
that keeps them with plenty of space, and it keeps the height down.
Wanna
I think
pose
would
that?
be-
Yeah, and one thought, Austin, have you been able to hear the dimensions proposed?
Yep, those all sound totally reasonable.
Okay.
And you have a shed roof on the cabin, and I don't know if that's going to stay, but, so it kind of keeps it in character with it. When you're drawing, you show this little building with a peak roof and everything, and I think this is just blends in better. So I would make a motion.
Definitely. No, I like to keep the character the same.
Okay.
I agree.
So are we ready for a motion on the shed?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve with all the additions that we've discussed.
Okay.
And Neva has all those around, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
There's a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Hearing none, I'll assume we're ready to vote. All those in favor of approval with the
Aye.
conditions signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. You have your shed too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Austin.
And
I'll send you an email after the meeting, okay?
Thank you. I hope it's warmer in Cook County than it is in Greenland right now.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Where are you in Greenland?
I'm at Summit Station. It's a research base in the middle of the ice sheet at about 10,000 feet.
My father helped build the Thule Air Base back in the early 50s.
Oh, cool. My wife was just up there a couple of weeks ago. It's beautiful up there.
He rode up in a freighter.
Okay, last
They were in the
item.
hold of the
All right,
freighter,
take care, Austin. We'll talk later.
And they could hear the ice scraping
Okay,
along the
thank
side.
you.
They're down in this
Bye.
boat.
All right, item B, Nicholas Popine for the property located at 149 Fireplace Road, Grand Marais, Minnesota. Property identification 51-401-4160. This variance application is for a request to relocate the entry door and stoop with a new walkway decking from the entry door to the exterior stairs onto the existing grandfathered non-conforming cabin 65 feet from the ordinary high water level of Poplar Lake. Nibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicants are requesting to relocate the front door entry on the existing non-conforming cabin approximately 5 feet to the east. The reconfiguration of the entry door will allow for interior layout improvements to the kitchen area. The entry roof overhang is proposed to be reconfigured as a peaked roof instead of an existing flat roof. The plans also include adding decking from the front entry to the exterior stairs, which will not require variance relief. The applicants identify in their application that the unique lot configuration presents a practical difficulty with conforming to the standards set forth in the ordinance. The parcel is surrounded by Poplar Lake on 3 sides, thereby making no conforming locations on this lot. The cabin was built originally in the 1940s. The proposed relocation of the entryway should have no visual impact to Poplar Lake since it faces the driveway entrance. The property is well vegetated and includes an established vegetative buffer within the shore impact zone on all sides of the shoreline. This proposal does not include a significant increase in the impervious surface area. The applicants have identified the unique lot characteristics as the practical difficulty. If approved, the following conditions may be applied to this variance. A septic inspection request form shall be submitted before the issuance of any land use permit, and no vegetation shall be removed from within the shore impact zone. Our office sent out 28 letters of notification at the time of this narrative, and still today, we've received no comments from the public. A memo regarding the septic system compliance from the environmental health officer is enclosed.
Okay, is there an applicant in the room?
Yep. Hi, good evening, Nicholas Popane.
Okay, comments?
I think the summary was very well and straightforward. What I'd like to do is, just to reiterate, is move the rear entry door, which is on the one non-lake side of the property. Move the entry door, shift it basically 5 feet to the east on the same facade. There's a window there today, so it's basically moving the door to where the window is. And what that would do is really help the interior. As you come in the cabin today, the kitchen is kind of split on two sides, so this would shift the door so that it aligns with an interior wall, so we have a little area for shoes and coats and whatnot, and get all the kitchen on kind of one side. And with that, change the existing shed roof to a peaked roof to better handle the snow loads there, and then extend the walkway to the existing exterior stairs.
Okay, thank you. We may have questions of you afterwards. There's nobody else in the room, it appears, to have comment on it, so we'll close it to the board and open for discussion here. Keith?
I think this meets the standards that we've established for granting variances. It's modest, it's really pretty, just a change, modest change in the door and so on. So as I look at all the requirements, I think it meets them all, and I have no problem with supporting the variance.
I support it as well.
Okay, Karen? Looks like we don't have a lot of questions right at the moment. If we're satisfied, does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
With the conditions?
With the conditions.
2 conditions.
A second.
And we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll assume we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
Great, thanks very much. Have a good
Thank you
evening.
for waiting so long.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, we couldn't
Appreciate
put
it.
you at the beginning.
We were able to keep you entertained most of the
We
time.
used to start these meetings at 7.
That would have got you.
Yep.
Well, I didn't mind. I actually liked
It'd
it
be
better
better
because
for me
5
in the
o'clock.
summer.
Is there a
5
motion to
o'clock is-
adjourn?
I move.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, same
Hopefully,
sign?
I'd rather sign it.
We are adjourned. We are adjourned.
Wait, we'll do it over.
Right, but 5 is, it's kind of like we're still busy.